Hello. I'm going to give you guys a second to join us. I'm very much on time today. And I triple checked the Wi-Fi, so hello everyone. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Good evening. Thank you so much for taking the time to join me today. This is a really special live for me. I'm really grateful to be in communication today with, no, I'm not releasing anything, with the incredible Marianne Williamson. We're getting into politics again. Yes. Because this is what we're on right now. We are not about to watch the country just poof, right? Welcome, welcome, welcome. Today's a really special live, guys. We're going to be tapping in with Marianne Williamson, who is a candidate on the Democratic bill. I want to preface the conversation with an understanding that we are in very particular times right now. And my intention, I want to make very clear, is to provide information for you to do what you will with. I'm not here to do anything except provide a platform for someone who I see as being silenced and who I believe has a lot of really incredible ideas that will be helpful to a progressive America that I see, to a progressive United States that can begin to do the work to heal what we have created and what we have become in this moment. So I'm inviting Marianne to come through so that she can share her perspective, her platform, her campaign with you all, so you guys can get a gist of someone else who is also running for the Democratic seat, or to be the Democratic candidate to run against the Republican Party in the upcoming elections. So we have primaries. And I really wanted to highlight primaries because we're not really talking about them because we are actively being silenced in these very interesting times. So I really, like I said, just wanted to use my platform to highlight some other options. Marianne is the one who has caught my attention. I have checked in with her campaign. She has a website, Marianne, with 2 N's, 2024.com, where she in detail goes into everything that she believes and everything that she wishes to bring to fruition while she is in office. So I'm gonna bring her into the chat so that we can get acquainted, everyone. All right, I just requested her.
I'm so sorry. I've been trying to request to come in and all that, and it wasn't so. I'm sorry it took me so long. I've been pushing buttons and.
No, girl, you're good. It was actually on me. I wanted to kind of do a little bit of a preface before having you
Okay,
come in,
great.
so
Thank you.
people know what's going on. But welcome. Thank you so much for joining us this
Oh,
evening.
thank you. Thank you so much for having me. Thank you.
Yes. Well, Marianne, I would love for you. Well, let me introduce you a little bit first. Marianne is obviously a Democratic candidate in the race against Joe Biden to run as the Democratic candidate for us. And she is an entrepreneur. She is an author. She is a spiritual leader, a political activist, and she's done a lot of incredible work. And for me, she's one of the main people that I've seen who is speaking any kind of sense right now. I will preface, obviously there are things that you and I don't all the way agree on, but I think that that's kind of the beauty of these kinds of conversations, to get people aware of where people stand, what's going on, and what kind of their options are in the midst of, this very singular narrative that's happening right now, where we're seeing that it's either Trump or Biden, and those are our two options, and that's kind of what's being pushed to the collective. And I personally refute that. I do not consent to that, and so I really want to just use whatever power or space I have to provide other options to speak their mind and to speak their truth, and to share what they want to bring to the table as well. So with that said, Marianne, please introduce yourself. And I would love to know just what got you motivated from the incredible prolific career that you've had as an author. What made you kind of shift your energy into wanting to go into politics?
Well, first of all, I want to acknowledge you and thank you. And I see myself in you, actually. You have a career in music. You are an accomplished woman. You don't have to be talking about politics. You don't have to be using your platform for this. The same spirit in you, it's the same thing in me. It's like, and I think that there's a connection, by the way. The same thing that gives you your power or chutzpah as a musician is what makes you know I'm not going to be quiet about political things. So it's very similar. I think there's a real similarity between us in that sense, and it's the same spirit, and I think the same spirit that many people feel. You know, we have been almost trained to think that we should stay in our lanes. You're a musician, stay in your lane. You're a writer, stay in your lane. You're an artist, you're whatever you are, and leave politics to this group of people that claim it is theirs. But that's not the American ideal. There's not supposed to be a special lane, a political club, a political elite. And we got to where we are because we have farmed out our best thinking. The things we feel so strongly and know and stand on in our own lives, we allow ourselves to go dumb when it comes to politics because we've been sort of trained to. Almost like we're talked to like we're sixth graders, even though in our personal lives and in our own professions, we get down, we get real, we get authentic, and we're even known for that. But when it comes to politics, we're supposed to leave it to someone else. Well, I think people are waking up now. We're 6 inches from the cliff in terms of the state of our environment, the state of our democracy, the state of so many people's lives. So in that sense, the same thing that animates me, animates you, and animates obviously millions of people that we see every day.
Yeah.
I just think that we should, as a nation, try to be good, just like in our own personal lives. We should try to be loving. We should try to be generous. We should try to be merciful. And we should try to respect the fragile bonds of life between us and the earth, between us and each other. And we have allowed ourselves to be lured into this very soulless perspective on politics and economics, where we're supposed to leave at the door our deeper feelings about what it means to be human, our relationship to food, to agriculture, to the earth, to one another, to children. And I think that where you and I sort of meet, and where I'm sure millions of people who respect your work, and I think people who respect mine as well, are like, yeah, we're ready for that. We have got to rein in these soulless principles of corporate profits that are sort of taking precedence over everything that is most true and beautiful, and it's got to stop.
I completely agree. I think that there are obviously quite a few fundamental issues with America and the way it was built and how things are and have played out. And I think that, you know, when it comes to what I think I really resonate with about your campaign is that you are talking about disrupting the corrupt. And I think that that for me is a really important thing that I've seen just in my few years that I'm 27 years old right now. I started voting when I was 18. And so I've had two presidencies that I could have been, that I was a part of, which was, the presidency where we elected Donald Trump and the presidency where we elected Joe Biden. And, I will be quite just starkly honest. I've seen the way that this political system works and runs, and it's very much by the corporations for the corporations, and it has nothing to do with people's interests, as we have seen demonstrated over and over again, like just in modern day, in exact right now times, even with just the entire erasure, I feel like, of these primaries and of the idea of something as another option to what we're experiencing right now, which is just pretty much right of center energy that we're receiving from the Biden administration. And I just personally feel like there is a largely progressive voice that is here amongst the youth and amongst my generation, amongst the generation underneath me, a generation that is voting for the first time this year at the polls, that are very resonant with what we're talking about, which is humanity, I think, at the end of it all and at the core of it all, which is that, you know, corporations should not be deciding how our economics are played out. Politicians should not be brought out to the point where they are doing insider trading and there is no consequence for it. And they are able to manipulate a market to profit for themselves at the expense of the American people. And I've been seeing this happen over and over again in a numerous amount of presidencies, if I'm being quite honest. There have been a select few people in the course of the United States history that have really proposed a progressive platform or campaign that actually cares about the working class people, about the middle class people, and about making sure that, you know, the average American is safe, taken care of, and by their own tax dollars, essentially. You know, this money that we're talking about diving into to make all of these policies happen, which I really want to get into, the kind of your ideals for what you want to see if you were to, you know, assume office. I think it's really radical, some of the stuff that you're saying, in the best ways possible, though, because to me, radical has been redefined for us, because, you know, like, I don't believe it is a radical concept to take care of our own people with the money that they generate for the government. I don't believe it's a radical concept to not want to invest in wars and to create, say, a Department of Peace like you're talking about in your campaign. I think that these things are vital in order to secure a future for not only me and myself and my generation, but for the generation underneath us and the generation that we intend to bring in to this world. You know what I mean? I really genuinely, and so many other women my age, like, we're like, are we really gonna have kids in this reality? Like, is that really something that we're trying to do? And, you know, obviously not. And we're seeing, you know, the rollback on Roe versus Wade, I believe, has deeply to do with those correlations, because they're hyper aware that we're not trying to have children right now, and the amount of heads are what drive corporate dollars, what drive taxes and all of these things that they need in order to survive as an entity. So I really want to get into some of your policies that you kind of just have come up with as solutions, starting with your economic bill of rights. I read that and I was like, yes, girl, okay, this makes sense. So I really want you to get into it and describe to the people what this is and what the 10 points are and what you envision with the economic bill of rights.
Franklin Roosevelt, when it was clear that the World War II was going to be over, he said to the American people, okay, what do you want? What do you want to have in the post-war America? And basically they said they wanted everything. They said they wanted universal health care. They said they wanted free college for everyone. So Roosevelt died, obviously, but what our economic bill of rights is taking it into the 21st century. Roosevelt talked about how we not only have freedoms of, there also should be the freedom from want and freedom from fear. And obviously, the majority of Americans live on some level of economic want, because there has been a destruction of a thriving middle class over the last 40 to 50 years. So the Economic Bill of Rights includes things that actually are considered moderate positions in every other advanced democracy. You know, you were talking about the word radical. Radical just means of the root. The truth of the matter is the Declaration of Independence is radical. We have never fully actualized it, but the ideal of all men created equal, governments instituted to secure inalienable rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, the idea that people have a right to alter the government if the government is not doing that. We're born of a radical idea. And it's our job to not only protect that ideal from assault, which we see in our generation, just as we've seen it in others, but also to expand it, to make it more real, to make it applicable to more and more people. So, universal health care, tuition-free college and tech school, canceling the college loan debt, subsidized childcare, paid family leave, guaranteed sick pay, guaranteed affordable housing, and guaranteed living wage. Now, there are some other little things like baby bonds I think are a good idea, but those that I just mentioned are what I see as the primary elements of an economic U-turn. And I think that the issue here is alleviation of stress in these little incremental pieces versus the radicalism, in a good way, of a fundamental economic U-turn. The ship is listing so far to the side that if you say, could we just Take it so that the average person has a shot at it. See, like before you were born in this long ago, far away called the 1970s, we were a country where the average American worker had decent benefits. The average American worker could afford a house. The average American worker could afford a car, could afford a yearly vacation. One member of the couple on one job could support a family of four. The one parent could stay home with the kids if they wanted, and they could afford to send their kids to college. But over the last 40 to 50 years, there's been a $50 trillion transfer of wealth. It's called theft. Talk about radical. That's what's radical. What that sort of war on the middle class that has been promulgated. It was strategized. It wasn't like it happened accidentally. And it has moved $50 trillion of wealth from the bottom 90% of the American people. So what we're talking about here is a season of repair. What we're talking about here is cutting the cord with this aberrational chapter of American history in which that level of economic injustice was just baked into the cake. And that level of injustice is now the status quo. That status quo will not disrupt itself. It's backed by too much power and too much money. And they have a lock. And the only way that we can override that is a revolution of consciousness, a peaceful, nonviolent revolution at the ballot box. That's our opportunity here, is for the people to step in. And the Declaration of Independence says that it's our right to do that.
Yeah, it does. I think for sure, I'm not gonna lie, I've become quite a bit cynical as I've watched the world become what it is in this exact moment. And kind of, again, I feel like a lot of us feel just kind of very backed into a corner about what our options are or aren't, and very manipulated into kind of thinking a certain way. And so it's been very difficult to kind of navigate where, like, how to really truly believe in politics, or even want to participate in these kinds of systems, when it feels like we're constantly fighting, you know, these incredibly kind of these incredible backslide in how power is distributed amongst us. But again, this is also kind of from the inception. All of these ideals that we're talking about were granted by people who, you know, owned people, and people who did not believe that women had these rights that they were talking about as well. And so bringing it, like you said, into the modern day, into what our reality is right now, is such an important, I think, piece of the puzzle that, like, every single politician is missing. Is like, we need to, the economy that they wish for us to be able to participate in is impossible to participate in for the majority of the people who are living here, the average person who is living here right now, especially in the current conditions, with the rise of inflation, with the way that things have shifted since the pandemic. So how do you intend to implement all of these kinds of things that you all of these points that you brought up? Like, what is the way? Because, you know, we talk about universal healthcare, we talk about canceling student loan debt, we talk about a livable wage and universal income, these concepts which, like you said, in any other advanced democracy, these are just, you know, middle way, you know, realities that are easily attainable. And while I understand that the United States itself is a lot of territory, a lot more territory probably than a lot of those, you know, smaller things are. And for that reason, we work via state often more than federal. Each state kind of does its own thing. You know, we still do federally applied things as well. So I'm just curious, like, what your vision is for how you would realize these ideals and concepts.
Would you mind if first I go back a little bit historically?
Yes, please.
Because you touched on those things, how it was at the beginning. And also when you talked about cynicism, I'd like to talk about both those things. As you were mentioning about people owning people, 41 of the 56 signers of the Declaration of Independence were slave owners. So that dichotomy has always been with us. I mean, the irony there is that everybody who signed, all 56 of them, were risking their lives to sign, because if the British had won the war, they would have all been hanged. they would have been executed as traitors. But 41 of them were slave owners themselves. So it is baked into the cake that America has this bipolarity in our national consciousness. It's always been there. Partly we are people who, as you are, as I am, as millions of us are, like truly, we get the power and the radicalism and the excitement and the profundity of the very idea that anybody should have a shot at it. Anybody should be able to. If they work hard enough and they show up for life, there should not be any unnecessary limits on their ability to soar. That's a profound, earth-shattering idea. And there have always been, however, from the very beginning, starting with the slave owners, people who, for their own ideological and financial purposes, had no intention whatsoever of seeing that made manifest. Now, that struggle has been inherent in every generation, including ours. We are not living through something different. We're living through the latest iteration of a struggle that has been there from the beginning. However, you talking about the cynicism and how feeling locked up. If you look at our ancestors, there was slavery and our ancestors responded to it with abolition. You think they weren't cynical and hopeless sometimes? There was the institutional suppression of women, and that was responded to with the women's suffragist movement and the passage of the 19th Amendment. We think they weren't cynical and hopeless sometimes. They responded to the Gilded Age with the establishment of organized labor. They responded to segregation and the institutionalized suppression of Black people with the civil rights movement. So the hope, and surely they felt hopeless. Surely they felt traumatized. Surely they were told, don't even think about it. It's locked up. You're not going to abolish slavery. You're not going to get a right to vote. You're not going to get a right to rights in the workplace. You're not going to desegregate. And so I think it's really important. You know, we spend a lot of time identifying the problems in our past, and it's true, and we need to. But I think there's so much to identifying with the problem solvers. So the cynicism, I did a post last night, a video. We all, it's so tempting to just go down. It's locked up. But that downward spiral emotionally, I think that's one of the reasons I'm running, because I saw people just going down. And then we get into anger and we get into cynicism, which just becomes an excuse for not helping. I mean, the truth of the matter is there is a way to override this. There is a way. And listen, they know that, or they wouldn't be erasing me. They know that, or they wouldn't be leaving me out of articles. They wouldn't be pretending I don't exist, because they know. So I think we need to remember what remains here, and what remains. And I'm not obviously minimizing the challenges or failing to recognize how locked up the system is. I'm in the middle of it right now, but I also know that when enough of us go, wait, we don't need to do this, but also realize the urgency of this moment, which is why I appreciate you so much, why you keep saying there is another choice. Because people are in this like trance, it has to be Joe Biden, even though every day more facts, his disapproval ratings, his sinking in the polls, many of the views he's taking that majority of Americans are going, we don't agree with that. Many of us are saying, and I think need to be saying, this is not a strong candidate against fascism in 2024. So again, thank you for giving me this platform, because too many people are thinking it, but are afraid to say it.
Yeah, I agree. I honestly, I just kind of refute the idea that it's fascism versus fascism, because to me, what we're seeing right now, witnessing the Biden administration is nothing short of the same concept. He just bypassed, Congress to send more weapons to a situation that is in need of a ceasefire. And like these kinds of authoritarian moves to do warmongering or war crimes is, to me, just completely unacceptable as an option for someone who I'm going to continue to hand power to. That's just absolutely not on the table for me. And I know for many, many, many Americans in this moment, especially speaking right now through and to this moment, because I think that this is a very revealing moment for a lot of us, not only about what's going on in the administration, but what's been going on in Congress, what's going on in the Supreme Court. How many of these people are actually truly bought out and actually truly supported by, establishments that do not have the interests of the American people at heart at all, and who are actually actively trying to silence us and actively trying to infringe upon our civil rights according to this Constitution that we keep talking about. You know what I mean? Here we have the inalienable right to free speech. And that is an important tool necessary to critique government and to critique, the idea and the rising of fascism. We are in this like neo-fascism state right now where we're watching ideals completely inundate the Republican Party, to where I can't take a single candidate seriously personally, because they're so united on the front of bigotry as their entire, core value. And and then when I see what's happening in the Democratic Party, I'm grateful for your platform, because I believe that, again, although we don't agree wholeheartedly on everything, there's some fundamental humanity that you are bringing to the table that no other candidate is bringing to the table. There is a fundamental interest in the average American person, the working class and the middle class, to make sure that people are taken care of and that they are surviving and that they are able to, keep up with the way that we're choosing to progress as a society. The fact of the matter, like you said, $50 trillion, 50 trillion, was that a correct number? That is an insane amount of money to siphon. And I know that during the pandemic, even just in the past 3 years alone, a very concentrated amount of those trillions of dollars has been allocated, and so many small businesses have been closed, so many people have lost their footing, and so many people are living paycheck to paycheck. And it's just, I don't really see a future where we ignore these things for the sake of donor dollars, or for the sake of, lobbyists getting their needs met, while, our incumbents are the people who are sitting in these positions right now have hundreds of thousands of calls being sent to them, and like, hey, this is how we feel about a topic. It's very clear when we look at the polls. I don't think it's all the way accurate regardless, but when we look at these polls, we're talking about a majority. And just by definition, democracy is supposed to reflect the opinion and the will of the majority of the people. And so we're seeing this constant, and I think right now with the Supreme Court and Republicans in different states, and not just Republicans, but also like just across the board, we're seeing people roll back our rights slowly but surely, especially women, and especially, our queer community, our immigrant community, Black and brown folks from all kinds of walks of life, and indigeneity. We're seeing with the climate crisis, that is a direct attack on the indigenous people of all over the world, globally. The fact that we are ignoring what's happening, and we're acting as if this is not a crisis, as if our children will not be affected deeply by us moving on the path that we are at right now. COP28 just happened, and what I saw was abysmal. Just the way that these leaders are speaking about our future as if it's a fucking payday to them. I'm sorry, excuse my language, but like, that just kind of energy is what kind of frustrates my generation, frustrates this younger generation, because it's just very obvious that the greed of the older generation has them in a chokehold. And it's just kind of like,
well, it's frustrating not only to your generation, it's frustrating to any conscious person.
right?
And it's not the greed of an older generation, it's the greed of an economic paradigm and the institutional forces that they represent. It's the institutional greed of insurance companies and pharmaceutical companies, chemical companies, big food companies, big agricultural companies, gun manufacturers, oil companies, and defense contractors. It's a matrix of corporate power, and they form a matrix of corporate tyranny, and their short-term profits come before the safety and the health and the well-being of the American people and our animals and our planet and our future in all the ways that you said. The issue is for us to recognize that Washington, they have the unlimited power that the Supreme Court has given these corporations to unduly influence political elections, has turned Washington into a system of legalized bribery. So that, once again, just as you said, in issue after issue, our leaders do more to serve the profit-making goals of their donors than to serve the well-being of their constituents and the will of their constituents, even when it's obvious. If you actually look at the polls, the American people are not the problem. And I see this over and over again. The majority of Republicans as well as Democrats want universal health care, tuition-free college, and so forth. We're a little bit, if you look at the polls, the Americans are a little bit left of center. We're decent people. The problem is this sclerotic political system that's like a lid. They're trying to keep the lid on something. That will not last forever. There's too much tension, too much anxiety. It can't, it's, in fact, it's not even that it's gonna blow, it's already blowing, but it's gonna break one way or the other. It's either going to break in the direction of greater justice, democracy, course correction, and repair, or it's gonna blow the other way. It's gonna blow into chaos, violence, neo-authoritarianism, etc. And that's why this is a moment for us to grab history. This is a moment for us to say, no, this is, no, no. Sometimes love says no. And it's interesting because in our personal lives, we get this. In our personal lives, I say to people all the time in my lectures, how many of you here know that there are times when you have to set boundaries? How many of you here talk all the time about how you won't tolerate abusive relationships? What more abusive relationship could you be in than with a government that knowingly allows carcinogens to be in your food? For no other reason than the big food company knows that it will have a longer shelf life with that toxin in there, therefore have a higher stockholder value, and their lobbyists are able to convince members of our own government do it anyway. What more abusive relationship can you get? The PFAS, the war, I mean, so much that it's time for us to do collectively what any of us would do in our personal lives, which is stop right there. Don't even think about it. That's, moral outrage is not born of anger. Moral outrage is born of love. And I think that it is love for ourselves and our children and our earth that now calls us to rise up and say, this will not be tolerated. We will not do this anymore. But we do need to realize the urgency of this moment, because I think a lot of people might even be feeling there's more time left than we might think. And there's not. This is the moment to rise up, like right now, right now.
Completely agree with you about that specifically, for sure. I believe that we've been trained for a long time to remain in this kind of docile, disinterested, distracted state as the American populace. I feel like when I look around, the average person is very disconnected from like the ways in which we are unconsciously consuming, to the degree where we support these kinds of systems, we play into these systems, and we are actively a part of these systems. You know what I mean? And like when we were talking about the moments and points in history where, there was a turn of events, it always took, we want to talk about peace and nonviolence. And I 100% am a pacifist in that kind of sense, in that I prefer that route. But then I also have to acknowledge the truth of this radical history, which is that sometimes you have to do what you have to do in order to drive a point home, and it takes collective action, collective dissent, and sometimes choice people doing specific targeted things. You know what I mean? And so at the end of the day, like, what revolution takes is what's necessary right now in these moments, and each of us has our own role to play in it. And I believe that politics plays a huge role in it, even though we've all very much divested from it because of all of the things that you're talking about, all of the corruption that is very clear to us, all of the ways in which these systems have been, siphoning our energy and our money and our attention in ways that drain us and leave us in a depleted state that in turn makes us sick, both mentally and physically, that makes us desperate, and creates a lot of social problems that we otherwise would not have if everyone's needs were being properly met by the abundant resources that are available to us, specifically as United States citizens. Because Bryden just got done saying, we could fund 2 more wars if we wanted to. And to that, I respond, like, if that's the case, then why are we making it so difficult for Americans to access this proposed wealth for their own benefit? One of the things that you are campaigning with that I think is also really incredible is the Department of Children and Youth. I would love for you to touch on that and kind of your vision for that, because that to me is a very, very important, very important.
Those of your generation are not 20th century people. You said you're 27. You were like, what, 4 years old when we became a different millennium. You're not 20th century people, and you're not dominated by a 20th century mindset. And the 20th century mindset was very mechanistic. The world is a machine. If there's a problem, you just tweak the pieces of the machine. 21st century is far more holistic and integrative and whole person. So we're not just interested in the 20th century mindset, and President Biden is certainly that. You treat the symptom. And if we're going to have a genuine, fundamentally transformational politics, we have to treat root causes. And there is no greater root cause than childhood, particularly early childhood. If we're going to have the country that we want in 20 years, we're going to have many more resources given to our children under the age of 10 today. We know, for instance, that 90% of the brain is developed in the first 5 years of life. A lot of that in the first year of life. So I want a massive transfer of resources into the lives of children during early childhood. We have children who are traumatized before preschool. We have elementary school students on suicide watch. We have public schools all around this country that have trauma rooms. Trauma rooms. Why is it that so many children in the richest country in the world are traumatized? And we also have children, millions of them, who go to schools where there aren't even the resources to teach the child to read. And if a child cannot learn to read by the age of 10, the chances of high school graduation are drastically decreased, and the chances of incarceration are drastically increased. So none of that is even to mention the fact that we have an entire generation going to school every morning praying to God that they won't be shot in the 6th grade today. So we need an entire, like one of the things I want to do is to be able to contact the greatest minds about early childhood, whether it has to do with neurophysiology, the brain, nutrition, the emotional needs. It has to start there, because if you just start trying to help people later, but they're already broken, right? What is it? There's some famous quote, and I can't remember it, something about it's easier to help a child than to try to fix a broken adult or something like that. So, you know, I think of children as the greatest collateral damage of this malevolent strain of vulture capitalism, because children aren't old enough to vote, so they're not a constituency. They're not old enough to work, so they have no financial leverage. And it takes us advocating for them, because collectively their needs are neglected on levels that we're not sort of facing as a nation. And I think looking in the mirror, the country looking in the mirror is really what I would like to help us do. I'd like to go back, if you still want. You asked, how would I do these things?
Yes.
Because I think that this is a very relevant question. The president doesn't have a magic wand. We don't want a president to have a magic wand. We have a president, not a king. And there are 3 co-equal branches of government. But at the same time, we shouldn't underestimate the power of the executive branch either. First of all, we have all these agencies that were set up to protect our interests, that were set up to advocate for us, but they have been infiltrated by corporate interests. It's called corporate capture. So for instance, you'll have corporate execs from big ag who are running the agriculture department. Or as we have now, the Secretary of Defense is a former board member at Raytheon. Well, I mean, that's outrageous, right? So that's
outrageous.
I know, outrageous. So the president has the power to appoint the heads of these agencies. Now, they have to be confirmed by the Senate, but the president has the power to say that corporate interest is no longer working here. Okay, that's number one. Number two, the president has the power. Listen, no matter who the president is, you're hoping that you're going to have people in the House and the Senate who agree with you and align with you. And to the extent that you do, you can get more done. To the extent that you don't, you get less done. That's true whether you're talking about Roosevelt or Biden or anyone. Yes, you were going to say?
Which is, I just want to kind of asterisk, which is why local elections are just as important as these primaries in this moment.
Well, absolutely. You were talking before about the federal system. Some of the ground zero, for instance, you were talking about women's reproductive rights. A lot of that now is in the states. And the president does not have the power, the jurisdiction to just go in there into the states and tell states what to do. You know, in South Carolina, they have a Republican supermajority, and 21, I can't remember if it's 21 or 23 state legislators in South Carolina supported a bill that would punish a woman who had an abortion with execution. Execution. 5 women, 2 Republicans, 2 Democrats, and 1 independent have pushed it back. This is what's going on. So like you said, in order, you know, I say to people all the time at my lectures, I am not saying send me to Washington to fight for you. That's so old think. I said, I want to go to Washington to co-create with you a new chapter in American history. What I'm going to be trying to do in Washington, you need to try to do in your state capital. The forces are as there in your state capital as they are there in Washington. We all have to rise up now. And once again, I don't want to pander to you here, but you exemplify it. The era of the ditzy woman is over.
Right.
The era of like, I don't know, it's just too much from, no, that's over. And we can't support it in ourselves and we can't support it in each other. And also you demonstrate, once again, I don't want to pander here, but you demonstrate that, yeah, I can have a successful career over here and still see politics as part of our collective assignment. None of us can afford to sit this out. And I think people are realizing that we have to develop this new layer of consciousness where you simply see concern for the whole, which is what politics is, as a layer of a well-lived, meaningful life. Now, the third thing that the president can do is the president has the bully pulpit. Now, the bully pulpit means you can talk to the people. So what I would like to think is that, in fact, I don't just would like to think it, I can say that I would lay it down as authentically and as real as president as I am now. If I'm president of the United States, I totally can see, somebody emails you and says, Lauren, the president would like to come on. Can we have a conversation? Rather than going out over there into this, there's this kind of Wizard of Oz narrative that they're wizards. I don't want to go be a wizard. I want to tear the curtain down.
Right.
And it has disempowered all of us to feel like, oh, they're going to do what they're going to do and there's nothing we can do about it. Yes, we can. We can tear the curtain down. And it's called voting. It's not that big a sacrifice. You register, you get involved in the primary, and as you keep saying, and you don't have to vote for Joe Biden.
That's what that's just what I think. I think that voting right now for me is kind of like a mediation tactic, like a method for us to use what collective power we do have left, especially those of us who are not, being gerrymandered and actively having our voting rights attacked in these moments. Like those of us who do have that access and do have that power and that collective voice, I think it's more important than ever to show up and to use it, because we are seeing so much pushback on democracy right now in so many different aspects. And we saw it in the last election. And we even saw it in Trump's initial election. You know what I mean? It's been 8-9 years now since 2016. And over the course of that time, we have seen, this back and forth between Democrats and Republicans, as if they aren't both working for the same agenda, as if they aren't both working for the same corporate dollars and the same corporate, allegiances. And this back
One
and
is
forth.
a whole lot better than the other, though, and we shouldn't forget that.
I agree with that. But then I think from my perspective, just personally, all of these systems play in and work with one
Well,
another.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Listen, I'm in the middle of that belly of that beast right now. So
Yeah.
believe me, more probably than you even know.
Yeah, and that's why I wanted to highlight, people like you who are in the Democratic Party. I remember originally you had run as an independent, but it obviously, the American consciousness is very much siphoned into believing that only between the two parties will any kind of competition exist, And so the reality of you being like, you know what, yeah, Democrat, I personally resonate with progressive Democrat energy way more than any other kind of route that I can take in that two-party system, So I respect you for seeing that choice and then moving in such a way where you have more of an opportunity to be present and to have your voice be a part of the conversation in a tangible way, because that's kind of where we are right now. It's like, yes, neither party is at all actively acting on their word. You know what I'm saying? And that's the biggest thing for me is although the Democratic Party has been speaking very eloquently and telling us all of the things that they would like to do for us, according to what it is that we need and what it is that we're saying that we want, I don't see a lot of follow-up with it. I don't see a lot of action to follow up with what we're being. You know what I'm saying? So
Yeah,
I think,
of course I
yeah.
do. What the president offers is incremental change. I mean, he says we've lowered some drug prices, but he said that he would veto a Medicare for all bill. He has said that he's the climate president, so he has given, and there have been some healthy investments in green energy in the Inflation Reduction Act. On the other hand, he's given more oil drilling permits than even Trump did. And he has okayed the Willow Project, the $8 billion ConocoPhillips oil drilling project on the North Slopes of Alaska. You put those two things together, and that completely nullifies everything, all of the benefits of the green investments in the Inflation Reduction Act. So this is part of what makes people cynical, the obvious hypocrisy. But once again, you don't have to go there. You don't have to vote for that status quo. In this case, and if I may say so, hello, I'm here. You have an option, and you can vote for someone who's not part of that system. And of course,
Hello.
their idea, and they would say that I'm not qualified because their idea of qualified means qualified to maintain and perpetuate the system as it is.
You know what I find so funny about anyone talking about you not being qualified is the fact that not only did we elect Trump into presidency for
Yeah.
4 years, he is a felon. He
Yeah.
is a felon, and he is still the one in conversation because of the cultish energy that he's been able to siphon, because he, like me, is a celebrity, quote unquote, and Americans are obsessed with celebrity culture, and people got to know him through his reality TV. People got to resonate with who he was as a character beyond just being a political figure. And I think that's also your advantage in such a way. I don't mean to draw any sort of comparison to Trump, but just in that regard of the fact that your energy, I told you this when we first spoke, but I got to know you through your writing. I read A Return to Love, and when I read that book, I felt so resonant with the content of this book, with the message of this book, which is humanity, which is returning to
Mhm.
heart-centered interaction and community and reality. And so knowing you from that, I was able to connect with your energy already because I understand kind of your values, and I resonate with your values because I have similar ones. And again, like I said, we don't agree on everything, but we agree on very much of the same values, which to me are the most important thing right now, because I don't expect to completely agree with politics. I know that it is a mediation tactic. Like you said, it's going to be incremental change regardless, because we do have a checks and balance system in place for a reason. And so it's dependent on us to be aware of the political situation that we find ourselves in, and not just submit our power in, like not just toss up our hands and say, damn, well, this is what they're telling us is what we can do, and that must be what we can do. No, we have seen over and over again that the media lies and is controlled by a very particular singular narrative, and that it is going to continue to push corporate interests over anything else, because that's who pays people's bills. Let's be honest. It's not even that serious of a lot of people, yeah, they're like, oh, they're evil. And a lot of people are evil, don't get me wrong, because to me, it's evil to be able to compromise your moral character for profit. That's never been a set in my value set. So I don't understand that, especially when you're in charge of an entire country of people, especially when you're in charge of constituents that are very vocal about what their needs are, and that they are not being met through crime statistics, through, disparity, economic disparity that we are seeing right now throughout the United States in all kinds of different levels of, income at this point. So it's like, can you imagine if it's difficult for someone who is usually used to being upper middle class, what does it look like for someone who was already below the poverty line? Like these are realities that the current elite that is running politics does not care about or be empathized with to any degree, because they didn't come from that. Because to even be involved in politics, one must have exuberant amounts of money to play with.
Well, even more what I've seen in this race, the system is set up so that it takes such an obscene amount of money to even be in the game. So unless you either have access to huge amounts of money or access to people who have huge amounts of money, you can't get near the pinnacles of power. And it's set up that way. So, keep the riffraff out, because to them, anybody who is not in that club, that elite club, is considered riffraff. And you're right, they control the conversation with their manipulations, their attacks, their smears, their mischaracterizations, or their invisibilization. And that's what we need to see through. And that's what we need to take every opportunity to override. And we can still override if we work together. And when you were talking about the humanity and the love of humanity, all that we're talking about here is the fact that collectively we could express the same values. And I think you said it earlier, public policy can help people. Remember, the public policy is spending money that belongs to the people. I mean, it's your taxes, it's your money. So why shouldn't your money pay for things that help you? Hello. And
When
that's what the Democratic Party used to stand for. I consider myself a Roosevelt Democrat. The idea that politics should stand for the unequivocal and unabashed service to the well-being of the working people of the United States. This shouldn't be, once again, going back to the word radical, that shouldn't be considered a radical concept.
yes,
And it certainly wasn't when I was growing up. And
I
we have to reclaim it.
use this money already to do to like to for their own gain. They use this money already to do incredibly corrupt
A,
things with it.
a
To
perfect
to bail out banks. They use it for corporate socialism. So I don't understand, if it's so easy for us to use our tax dollars for corporate socialism, why it is such a radical thing,
Right.
or such
Yeah.
a point.
Well, you know, Martin Luther King said if they give it to the poor, they call it a handout. If they give it to the rich, they call it a subsidy. And they said the same thing to Roosevelt. This idea that anything that helps people, ooh, it's socialism. It's socialism. It's this ridiculous boogaboo that's used to scare people. Um, the truth, I think a perfect example is this college loan debt. You know, before the 1970s, we had free college. There was a system at University of Florida, there was a system at University of Texas, there was a system at University of California. The college loan debt is such an example, this unholy economic alliance of government, banks, and lending companies. Talk about the tentacles of unfettered capitalism. What they do is it's like a heat-seeking missile. Where can we find a profit center? Where can we create a profit center? And preying on your own young. How immoral is that? How predatory. Ooh, young people are desperate for an education. Well, of course they are. They want to spread their wings. They want to be able to live the life, once again, pursuit of happiness. So many people were told, particularly people of color, were told, if you get an education, you can close that wage gap. Now you have tens of millions of people carrying this debt. I can't even imagine what it would have been like in my 20s carrying tens of thousands of dollars worth of debt. Debt is crippling. We have 1 in 4 Americans living in medical debt. We have tens of millions of Americans carrying these college loans. We have millions of people who are just praying to get out of debt before they die. And also that in that case, the banks, the lending companies, and the government is involved in that. That's why that college loan debt should be absolutely, completely eradicated, because it should never have existed.
I wholly agree. Totally agree with you, man. Like, and it's again just another system set up to fail the people, to fail people
The
who are
majority of the people. It's
right,
set up to serve a small minority of the people.
right, who already have all of these economic benefits to begin with, because they are the ones who have access to generational wealth, and who are the ones who are, able to go to these universities via, what's that called? Lineage? What's it called?
Yeah, legacy,
Legacy.
legacy. Yeah.
Legacy. They already have these doors open to them, and they already have opportunities awaiting them when they leave universities. And then they still choose to discredit, the different systems that have been, and dismantle the different systems that have been put in place to make sure that, folks of color also get opportunities, or equal opportunities in comparison, or equitable opportunities in comparison to these legacy
A, a
beings.
conscious person doesn't want to feel that they're creating wealth at the expense of other people having a shot at it. It's not a bad thing to make money. It's a good thing to make money. The problem in America is that not enough people ever get a chance. And many people are locked out of that potential even when they're children. So that's what's wrong. You know, I read a book called The Gardens of Democracy, and it was likening to what would happen if all of the blood in the body went into one arm. Blood has to circulate. Economic opportunity has to circulate. And something is very, very wrong when all the opportunity for easy access to health, the easy access to education, easy access to jobs, easy access to just the opportunities of life are all in the hands of one small group of people. There was a late Supreme Court Justice, Louis Brandeis, who said, you can have large amounts of money concentrated in the hands of a few, or you can have democracy. You can't have both.
Literally.
So we got to fix that. That's all. We got to fix it. And that's, you know, that's what the abolitionists said. That's what the women's suffragists said. That's what the labor union said then and now. That's what the civil rights workers said. And that's what you and I are saying. It's simply, okay, we got to fix that. Yeah, that's wrong. Time to fix it. Move on, make things better. And that's got to be the ultimate story here. Not ain't it awful, but how, yeah, we're going to fix that.
Right. I would love to touch upon a couple. I mean, I know we got like 5 minutes till we're an hour in. So I don't know if maybe we could do like a part two sometime because I'm like I feel like
Sure, I'll do whatever you want, Lauren. I'm so grateful to you.
Thank you. I'm so grateful to you. I really you're just giving me, you know, these little bursts of hope that I need to like keep going. Like when I hear you speak, I'm like, oh my God, sense. Oh my God.
Well, right back at you. I'm seeing your future as you're talking here today. I'm thinking, oh my God, when she's 35, wow, when she's 45, I think you'll be running for office someday. I see a lot for you actually in your future. Yeah.
We'll see. I'm definitely, you know, I don't know.
Yeah,
One
this
thing,
stuff's in you. It's got to come out.
I feel like I have a past life where I was like a queen or something. Like
Yeah.
somebody, I was
Yeah.
delegating
I
stuff.
was a queen in a neighboring kingdom.
You know what I mean? Like,
Queendom. Yeah, I do. I really do.
um, I wanted to touch on this. I'm like looking through all of the like issues that you have here because but like there's so much to get into as potential. But let's see, what can we get into today?
Just for everybody to understand, you're talking about my website, Marianne2024.com, and you're looking at the issues section, right? That's what you're talking about. Yeah.
Yes, I am doing exactly that. And guys, it is literally foolproof. Like if you go Marianne, 2Ns, 2024.com, it's a whole, let me show you. It's a whole list right here. You see this? A whole list. And each one of these, if you click on them, have like her detailed opinions on each specific issue and topic. And different like things, resources of her speaking in certain places, or just quotes of how she feels about said things. There are animal
And
protection.
policy prescriptions, specific policies, not just opinions, but specific policies of how we're going to change it.
Valid. Thank you for that correction. That is, I'm talking to a presidential candidate.
Hey, Lauren, I'm running.
I've never done this before. I feel like
You're doing really good.
But I wanted to touch a little bit on education because I know you talked about the Department of Children and Youth. My mom is a public school teacher in Florida.
What grade?
Yeah, and I watched her struggle my entire life with having to, you know, put in 10 times the effort to make sure that her students got what they needed, especially during the pandemic. The way that my mom and her math department showed up to make sure that these kids were taken care of when they were given absolutely no resources to do so, and actually penalized in random ways that I don't even, that's my mom's business. But you know, I watched her go through some serious stuff, and I'm just been seeing a slow but sure privatization of public schooling. And I have also, I mean, obviously the public school system works in such a way where depending on your neighborhood, it's dependent on the quality of education that you receive, which, as you were saying earlier, for your Department of Children and Youth, making sure that these children get what they need and that they're invested in from the ages of 0 to 10 in such a way that sets them up for a future of success. includes, I think, vitally how they are educated, and how that's invested in. So I just would like to hear your ideas or your policy on these kinds of issues.
Well, what you just referred to, we are the only major advanced democracy that bases so much of our educational funding on property taxes. That's what's at stake there when you talked about depending on what neighborhood you're in. So when you see, for instance, the comparisons between American school children and school children in other countries, we do really poorly. But if you're a white child in an advantaged neighborhood, you stand to have a public school education